just a few months of Raffles' arrival here in 1819, the word of his intention to create a duty-free emporium had spread across the region and indeed around the entire world with amazing speed for those days. The prospect of a free port and the opportunities for profitable trading that this represented quickly attracted people of all races from every place who gathered to Singapore like bees round a honeypot. And it was these very people who were to make Sir Stamford's brainchild an almost overnight success. Amongst them were the Arabs, but they in fact were no strangers to these parts. They had been trading and settling in Southeast Asia for centuries by this time. Long ago they had introduced Islam to the region, and they also brought with them their proven business acumen, both of which were woven into the rich and cosmopolitan tapestry of the emerging Singapore identity. Notable amongst the early arrivals was one Said Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al-Kaf. And here we are at what was once the magnificent and palatial hilltop residence of later members of his family. Built in 1920 on the summit of Mount Faber, the house was originally known as Mount Washington. It enjoyed magnificent views over Keppel Harbour and the outer islands and was the beneficiary of cooling sea breezes. It was also the venue of many a lavish entertainment. We know the place better today as Al-Kaf Mansions. The Al-Kaf family fortunes were established by Said Mohammed himself. He was a merchant who dealt in iron and textiles and spices. Astute and diverse investments by Said Mohammed and then subsequent generations of Al-Kaf resulted not only in this splendid mansion, but also in the once legendary but now forgotten Al-Kaf Gardens.
Al-Kaf Gardens was some distance away, off McPherson Road and nearby to Serangoon Road. Opened in 1929, the placid green acres offered picnic tables under shady trees, neat landscaped pathways, a boating lake, and Singapore's first Japanese gardens. There was also the novelty of a camel somewhere amongst it all. But though very popular, the gardens and the camel enjoyed only a short life.
The gardens closed in 1949. The hills were levelled and the lakes filled in, and those rather lovely angsana trees were felled. But rest assured, I'm reliably informed that no such fate is about to befall the magnificent Al-Kaf Mansions, which will remain with us. And that's good to know.
Al-Kaf Gardens are today the Senate estate. However, Al-Kaf Mansion lives on in serene splendour atop Mount Faber, patiently awaiting a new role, and we can promise you that it won't be that of a housing estate. It will remain on the nation's register of heritage treasures, in the company of such other architectural masterpieces as three we're about to pay a visit to. The first of these being the majestic Sultan Mosque in Kampong Glam, a familiar landmark. But how many of you have actually been inside? Not all that many, I'd imagine, so let's join our man with a hat for a guided tour.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. Wow, well, this is certainly a magnificent place. You know, I've never been inside, even though I've lived in Singapore most of my life. I've never been inside here. Tremendous space.
You're lucky.
So when was the mosque built?
The mosque built in 1824. That time there was Sultan Hussein Shah,
Yes.
and with the help by Sir Stamford Raffles
Right.
and East India Company,
Yes.
they donated about 3,000 to build the first mosque.
Right, okay, and that was a sort of wooden structure, was it?
Is the mosque previously is a single story
Right.
with 3 tiers of pagodas.
Like the traditional Malacca style.
Yes, in Malacca
mosque,
style.
Yeah.
It can be seen in Malay Peninsula.
Right. But because I understand, I mean, this particular building was built by a British architect.
Yes,
Right,
it's
that's-
by the Swan and Matt Aarons.
Right.
We built all the our city hall and the
Right.
magistrate
Yes,
courts.
I mean, they were the most prestigious architectural
Architects.
practice at that time. Yeah.
Yes, right.
So the style of architecture is more from sort of northern India, is it?
Yes, most likely from northern India. You see the structures
Yes,
of
yeah.
the building, the interiors.
Yeah.
It's more like Indian types.
Yeah, so this is what the
And like the
English
church
sort
as
of
well.
mosque should look like,
Yes,
rather
right.
than Malay style mosque of
Correct.
Malacca. In this
True,
building.
true.
So-
Because
so-
that time, in 1824, we don't have an architect.
Right, yeah.
They have a copy from the mosque in
Yeah.
that we found in Malay Peninsula.
Right.
Whereas in under past 100 years,
Yes.
so in 1924, so they get a better architect
Best
firm
in town,
to build the mosque.
So this is the mihrab, correct in saying? Yeah.
Yeah, this is
the
the
direction
mihrab,
of
the
Mecca.
directions where before the Muslim performing the prayers,
Yeah.
they must have a mihrab
Yeah.
direction towards the Mecca. This is the minbar,
Yeah.
where every Friday the imam or the priest will give a sermon, do
Right.
and don'ts.
Yeah.
So all these texts were controlled by our Muslim religious councils. In our mosque, there are 6 ethnic groups
Right.
who run the board of trustee.
Okay.
So they are the Arabs,
Yeah.
the Bugis, the Malays, the Javanese, the Tamil, Northern and Southern.
Right. So,
So-
that encompasses the entire Muslim
Yes,
community in Singapore.
correct, in
That's very
Singapore.
interesting. Now, I noticed these galleries on either side. I mean, is that they have a special?
Our mosque can accommodate about 5,000
Really?
in one congregation,
Yeah.
mass praying.
Yes.
Okay? So that's why we have a special place for the ladies. That's at the upper level, the second floor, right at the
I
end.
see. So 5,000, that's a lot. I mean, I see this is very, I've never seen this unique feature where everyone has their place.
So normally after 10 years, we ask for the Saudi government to donate this carpet
Okay.
to our mosque.
Another thing I noticed are these magnificent lights. This looks a particularly old one. Where does that come from?
This we bought from Turkey since
Right.
1928 until now.
Oh, right, it's part of the original.
Yeah, for the
fixture.
original pictures.
Really?
And this modern we purchased in the year 2001. This lighting concept they get from Mecca,
Oh, really?
in Holy City of Mecca.
Yeah.
So we bought from Egypt.
Friday prayers, is it usually pretty packed?
Yes, it's very packed.
Yeah.
In between 4,000 to 5,000.
Gosh. All right, well,
you.
thank you very much for your
Same
time.
to you, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
Though the Sultan Mosque appears to share its architectural inspiration with India as well as the Middle East, the influence of the early Arab communities' prominent families is still evident today in many places and in many forms.
After the break, we'll move on from the Al-Kafs, Al-Sagoths and Al-Junaids to the Pereiras, the D'Souzas and the Tennysons. I'll be back. When Stamford Raffles conceived his grand plan for the settlement, he indicated where the Chinese, the Malays, the Indians, even the Europeans should live. But it seems that he made no provision for the Eurasian community, who were left to form their own enclaves. And one of the earliest was here, in the vicinity of St. Joseph's Institution, where many of them received their education. Today, of course, St. Joseph's has become the Singapore Art Museum.
This early enclave was loosely bounded by Middle Road and Bras Basar Road, and in between Bencoolen and Queen Streets. The Eurasian community lived in shop houses, bungalows and terrace houses in these two areas we've highlighted. And this is what's become of the first site on the corner of Bras Basar Road and Waterloo Street.
The second and much larger site has also completely vanished, but it used to occupy about 200 metres of Queen Street behind me. And in the 1920s and 30s, the residence list read like a who's who of distinguished Eurasian families. The D'Souzas and the Pereiras, the Tessensons and the Mossbergens, the Sheppertons and the Norrises. They were all there, and they hadn't come to live here simply by chance. Not only were they close by to the venerable St. Joseph's Institution, where their children could be educated, but they were also a proverbial stone's throw from this magnificent Gothic edifice, St. Joseph's Church, where every Sunday they would congregate to worship.
Well, this church has been here for more than 100 years. You get a lot of these Portuguese Eurasians congregation up here because It started more than 100 years ago with only 12 Catholic families.
Really? Where did they come from originally?
Most of them from Malacca. In fact, there's where the Portuguese-based the settlement started off in Malacca. It's about more than 300 years ago, before even Singapore was discovered.
Yes.
And they've also brought their language, their culture, and their food along with them. The first Portuguese mission church was in fact a house where the current Raffles Hotel is. It was built by the Almeida family.
Who came from Macau?
Yes. Then going back again, they started building a small chapel, which is today Napa Building, the School of Arts is. Then eventually they built this church, later part of that. So it became a center for the Eurasians in Singapore.
They sort of meet here on a Sunday.
Yeah, they meet here on a Sunday. You know, it's something like after church, they will just gather around and talk about your family, my family. And I've said, I've got a lovely daughter. She's looking for a husband. You know, and it starts with a Sunday morning sort of cup of tea, and that's how he has gone for over the 100 years in Singapore.
The Eurasian community today is more readily identified with Katong, where many families relocated themselves during the 1930s as the suburb developed. Of the Eurasian community's presence in Princeps Street, along the length of Saligi Road, at the base of Mount Sophia, and at Kirk Terrace, practically nothing remains. 20 years of redevelopment have seen all evidence of Eurasians in the area totally wiped from the map. It's an all too familiar story, and there's an all too familiar figure crossing Victoria Street. Less traffic about then than there is now.
Doubtless a few Eurasian families lived here in Holloway Lane. St Joseph's was just up the road after all. But you won't find this sunny little thoroughfare on any street map today either. Because that's Holloway Lane back there, being very efficiently demolished, along with the entire block between Victoria Street and Northbridge Road. It's now the construction site of the new National Library, but at least the recently gazetted St Joseph's Church will remain as a permanent reminder of this early Eurasian enclave. Now, for those of you who might be interested in learning a little bit more about the history of Eurasians in Singapore, I can definitely recommend two publications. The first is Singapore Eurasians, Memories and Hopes, which is a kind of oral history volume with lots of great photographs. And the second is the rather more zany Elvis Lived in Katong, an affectionate piece of nostalgia and great fun. We certainly can't leave the subject of Singapore's Eurasians without mentioning one of their most famous sons, Sir Benjamin Henry Shears. A professor of medicine who rose to the very pinnacle of his profession, he was also the Republic of Singapore's second president. And of course you see behind me the edifice that was named in his honour, the splendid Benjamin Shears Bridge, an enduring monument to a true Singaporean and a very worthy fellow. Now here's a bit of a brain teaser for you. Members of the older generation probably won't find it too difficult, but the young generation might find it a bit of a challenge. Now who is this distinguished gentleman that we have here on the wall? Singapore born, but with parents from Baghdad in Iraq. Recognize him? I do hope so. His name is, of course, David Marshall, a man with a brilliant legal mind, but who is best remembered today as Singapore's first elected chief minister on the road to independence. Now, a lot of you probably knew that, but were you aware that he was also Jewish? Although Singapore's Jewish community has never been that large, like the Eurasians, they have made a substantial contribution to the nation's history and development since they first arrived in 1830.
When 9 gentlemen of Middle Eastern appearance arrived, the casual observer could be forgiven for thinking them Arabs. They spoke Arabic, their clothing looked Arabic, and their hometown was Baghdad. But they were in fact Sephardic Jews, Singapore's first Jewish immigrants. They became profitably involved in the spice trade, brought their families out to join them, and thus was begun Singapore's small but flourishing Jewish community.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Good
Raphael.
afternoon.
I've been admiring your fabulous building from the outside. It's a place I've passed 1,000 times before in my life, but I never realized it was such a fabulous interior.
This synagogue was built in 1905 by Sir Manasseh Meyer, when the one in Waterloo Street was having an overflow of Jewish community. So, and he has to walk here from to Waterloo Street. So he decided he got a big piece of land. He built his own synagogue.
And the architect, I believe, was Bidwell, the same chap who built Raffles Hotel and the Cricket Club and Goodwood Hotel and all those other places.
On the hill directly behind the synagogue, Sir Manasseh Meyer built a stately mansion, which he named Bellevue, and also had constructed a set of steps to lead him down to the Chassid El Synagogue. The steps are still here today. However, the land which his mansion occupied has become a condominium, also known as Bellevue.
This gallery is for the women?
Yeah, for women, because we men and women cannot mix during prayers.
Yes.
And we only mix up with our festival called Simchat Torah. When we bring them all downstairs, we rejoice, we drink whiskey, we drink brandy, and tabernacle had been taken out, and the Torah been taken out, and we rejoice with it. It's like, well, Moses got the law,
right,
the Ten Commandments.
So the tabernacle, I mean, this is where the services are conducted from up here.
Conducted by the rabbi here.
Rabbi,
The men are seated all over the place.
Right.
When you go to a synagogue, any synagogue, if this, what we call a bima, the tabernacle, is in front, it belongs to the Western Jews, the Ashkenazis.
Right.
But if in the center, it's a Sephardic, the Eastern Jews.
Because most of the Jewish community came from Baghdad.
Baghdad, and from Baghdad, where they went to India. From India, they went to Burma. Burma, they came down to Singapore.
Right.
That's when Sir Manasseh Meyer came down. Well, he came from India. But his ancestors came from Baghdad.
Right, yeah.
Well, 99% of our people are from Baghdad. This is the original chair of Sir Manasseh Meyer. This chair must be 80 to 90 years old.
Well, it looks in remarkably good condition.
And we keep it in a good condition. In memory of him.
Sir Manasseh Meyer also had built for his family and himself a seafront residence, in addition to his city residence behind the synagogue. Built around 1890, it stood on the corner of Tanjong Katong and Amber Roads, exactly where Eastern Mansion stands today. Sir Manasseh called his Katong beachfront home Joshua, after his uncle, Mr. J.R. Joshua. And although many impressive bungalows grace the East Coast shoreline, Joshua was possibly the very finest of them all.
He installed a large generating plant in 1911 to provide Joshua with electricity. And having an inclination towards profit as well as personal comfort, he offered to supply the nearby Seaview Hotel with electrical power as well. Enterprising fellow.
Affectionately known as the Grand Old Man of the Jews, he was knighted at the turn of the 20th century in recognition of his beneficence and public services, and 9 years later was responsible for introducing Singapore's first apartment block, Crescent Flats in Katong. 12 years later, opposite St Andrew's Cathedral in Northbridge Road, he built a second apartment block, the 5-story Meyer Mansions. As well as accommodation, the building also housed offices and shops, and was a familiar landmark until 1970, when it was demolished to make way for Peninsula Plaza. So, of all Sir Manasseh Meyer's excellent architectural achievements, only the Chassid El Synagogue remains today.
I have to say yet again, it's just such a magnificent building. It's a real treasure.
Would you like to see the Torah?
I would very much indeed.
This is the Torah. And every tabernacle has got the 5 books of Moses.
Really?
Some came from Baghdad. And it's all handwritten. It cannot be printed.
I've never seen a book like this. Goodness gracious.
We get a rabbi from Israel to write it, and when he finishes it, he will send it over.
Oh.
It's written on parchment.
Yeah. It's
You got-
quite beautiful script as well.
We have some Torah which is over 90 years old, 100 years old, but the parchment
Right, yeah.
don't spoil.
Yes, isn't that fantastic? So, I mean, there's a complete Torah in each of
In
these
each and
canisters.
every one of them.
Right, and yeah, that's astonishing. Singapore's multiracial population has brought together people from all over the world with a wide variety of different cultural backgrounds. We all know that. However, it's often too easy to overlook the role that ethnic minorities have played in making the nation what it is today. And the contribution of people like the Arabs, the Jews, the Eurasians has had enormous value and significance, despite their relatively small numbers. Now, the only remaining question is which of their many and splendid cuisines shall I partake of in order to conclude this week's programme? Whilst I consider this rather agreeable subject matter, why don't you take a look and see what's on next week's episode?
Julian's got the big guns out next week, and he's boldly going where few have gone before. A sleepy town where jets touch down is all about Changi, and there's not an ice lemon tea in sight. Davison delves deep and Davison flies high, but Changi's not just about an airport. He's off to prison, but hopefully his visit will be short. We need him back for another 4 programs. All this and more on next week's Sight and Sound.
In Holland Village, one really is spoilt for choice when it comes to dining out. However, I have carefully selected one particular eatery which I consider to be quite excellent. You find me at the Alhambra Lebanese restaurant, and my friends here are laying out what promises to be an absolutely delicious spread. Now what have we got here?
This is Alhambra Mixi Grill,
Wow.
special dish on the charcoal. Sometimes.
Well, thank you. That looks absolutely fantastic, and I have to say, I'm famished. So, until next week, I will bid you a fond farewell and sahten. That's Lebanese for bon appetit. And here's a little arak to help things along the way. Crikey. The Mossbergens and Tennantons, the Shepherdsons, God, it's too much. They're from all over the world. Wide. So, it's too early in the morning. We'll move on from the Alsagafs. I know, it's going to be a diabolical one, this one. It's Sir Stamford's vision of something or other. Yeah, so we certainly can't mention anything.